Every night I wake up in a cold sweat, clutching my waifu body pillow with memories of my recurring nightmares still lingering behind my eyes. Motorcycling is dying, and there's nothing I can do to save it. I try to outrun the Grim Reaper, but I can only find an electric bike. The range rapidly dwindles as I push further into the abyss. The road is littered with the rusted carcasses of four-cylinder superbikes. The sounds of viral TikTok challenges echo in the air. I hear a voice say,
"Motorcycles? How cringe."
When the range reaches zero and I coast to a stop, I feel a cold skeletal hand grab onto my shoulder, and I know the end is imminent. And I wake up half relieved and half fearful, because death hasn't come for motorcycling yet, but it's starting to look like it might be in the not so distant future. Today's video is sponsored by Rockform. Let's get into it. In 1970, 800,000 motorcycles were sold in the United States. In 2021, 550,000 motorcycles were sold. For perspective, there are also 130 million more people living in the United States now than there were in 1970. So that fact alone shows pretty clear evidence that motorcycling is waning in popularity. There have been multiple booms for the industry in the past with varying reasons. Immediately after World War II, returning soldiers were attracted to motorcycles to retain a sense of adventure and camaraderie after assimilating back into normal American life. Motorcycling was a way to channel the visceral adrenaline rush that many were missing after returning from active duty. They were partial to Harley-Davidson, a brand that had become acquainted with operating the military-commissioned models overseas. They started riding clubs, and the brash, tough guy motorcycling attitude became a part of American pop culture. Then after the Honda Nice campaign, motorcycling became even more prevalent as other rider demographics were introduced to the sport. Everyday Americans were now able to ride motorcycles without having to assume the identity of leather-clad rebellious outlaws. Popularity of motorcycling continued to grow in the 1970s due to the oil crisis, where motorcycles served as a more economical and energy-efficient form of transport. As motorcycling grew in popularity, officially sanctioned racing events including road racing, dirt track, and hare scrambles grew the sport into a greater form of recreation that would allow manufacturers to begin making more specialized and performance-oriented models. Motorcycles became better, faster, and cheaper as the Big Four began to dominate the marketplace. Combined with a low cost of living, plenty of disposable income, and an attraction to danger and risk, motorcycling remained a prominent fixture in American culture. Most recently, motorcycling peaked in popularity in 2006, in my opinion. Interest in motorcycle racing was at an all-time high. There were several factory-supported teams in AMA, which is unthinkable nowadays. The late 90s and 2000s were a hotbed of extreme activity. The X Games debuted and coincided with a new resurgence in extreme sports like skateboarding and motocross. Motorcycling was routinely featured in big Hollywood blockbusters like The Matrix Reloaded, and even music like Rage Against the Machine, Limp Bizkit, and Blink-182, while not directly related to motorcycles, was catering to a generation that was attracted to rebellion and nonconformity, which are all characteristics akin to motorcycling, whether you want to believe it or not. There's no way of avoiding the fact that motorcycling is, in and of itself, a rebellious act. By riding a motorcycle, you're taking on a greater risk that requires more specialized training and equipment to pursue personal autonomy and a thrilling, visceral experience. Motorcycling may no longer be seen as rebellious in the old-school tough guy biker way, but it is rebellious nonetheless, and the culture of the late 90s and early 2000s fostered that mentality. The cultural landscape, combined with the ease of attaining credit and a not-so-dismal view of the economic future, led more people to go out and make financial decisions that to many younger people today would be seen as reckless. But at that time, it wasn't unheard of to go and buy a super sport with zero money down and a very forgiving interest rate just because you wanted to. And then, with the financial collapse of 2008, many younger Americans, whether they realized it or not at the time, were about to be royally screwed for the rest of their lives. If you're a young person watching this video, there's a good chance you're probably watching it on your cell phone. And how are you going to keep watching Amy Noob if your phone falls out of your greasy Cheeto fingers and obliterates into a tiny million pieces? Exactly. Luckily for you, I have a solution: Rockform, baby. Rockform is the ideal choice for motorcyclists. Their phone cases are drop tested from 6 feet, so all you short kings in the audience have nothing to worry about. Once you've got the Rockform case, it can seamlessly attach to a Rockform handlebar mount in just seconds. And you can do all the dank nooners you want, and it won't be going anywhere. We've worked with Rockform for a very long time here on the channel, and then the only phone case and mounting system I recommend for all motorcyclists. Rockform has cases for every phone and mount for every style of bike. Head over to rockform.com and use the code YN25 for 25% off your order. Again, that's YN25 for 25% off your order on Rockform. Thanks so much for the support, Rockform. Now let's get back to the video. The average age of a motorcyclist in America is about 50 years old, and that average is only decreasing because older riders keep dying off, not because more young people are beginning to ride. One of the most glaring reasons for the decline of motorcycling is the economic disadvantages younger people face. Millennials were the first generation to be worse off financially than their parents, and things don't look much better for Zoomers or whatever the hell comes after them. Average income is nowhere near staying on par with inflation or the overall increase in productivity, and essentially everything from food to housing is becoming exponentially more expensive, and people aren't earning anywhere near what past generations were relative to inflation, and interest rates are pretty damn high right now. All of this leads to an inherent financial uncertainty that many young people are faced with. And when you're in the midst of that, the very last thing people are interested in is purchasing a motorcycle, which for most is viewed as a luxury good or an expensive hobby. But that's not to say that there aren't some highly enlightened individuals who see motorcycling as the antidote to their cultural ennui. 1.3 million of them subscribe to this channel, but it's definitely not common amongst a majority of the population. Younger generations are also becoming increasingly more risk averse. With greater access to information thanks to this wonderful gift called the internet, individuals are now able to scare themselves out of things before they've even had a chance to learn a lesson themselves the hard way. People used to take more risks, be more adventurous, and enjoy the act of thrill-seeking. Now, people can just watch TikTok about something and never actually have to do it themselves. There's an idea I've been very interested in lately. It's about how we're replacing cultural activities that fostered community with mindless consumption, and ultimately compulsive consumption. This graph is a tidy summary of it. With enough high-quality media, does one even need to ride a motorcycle, or is it enough to witness someone else doing it? Algorithmic sorting of media and content tends to flatten culture. It's not valuable to society to produce creative, innovative, or interesting ideas. You just simply have to produce things that get attention and capture audience retention. Content, media, art, and yes, even motorcycling suffers from this. We all get flattened to the sameness of parallel twins capturing as many sales as possible in a market and Insta360 videos of squids on TikTok. Perhaps riding a motorcycle is not enough stimulus for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who are used to doubling or even tripling down on content and screens. Is the visceral thrill of going wide open on a leader bike a salve for ADHD adult teens, or is that drug simply not going to hit the same way that compulsively betting on sports teams will? I imagine that prior to the internet, you rode a motorcycle with some buddies and had maybe heard an anecdote or two about someone laying her down, but otherwise your perspective on motorcycling was pretty insular and related to just a handful of first-hand experiences. Whereas now, thanks to action cams and social media, you can see dozens of people crash on their motorcycle the moment you open your feed. And you can see people constantly ranting about ATGAT, and you can be inundated by crash statistics, and all of these things are just scaring people away from motorcycling, which doesn't take very much considering younger generations are literally afraid of everything, because as it turns out, having an iPad shoved in your face the minute you popped out of the womb, and then having an endless flow of information beamed into your prefrontal cortex from the moment you wake up in the morning, the moment you go to bed at night, every single day for the entirety of your life, is not good for your mental health or a growing brain. And again, for a lot of people, motorcycling is the antithesis to this. It allows you to tune out and focus, tap into a primal, visceral experience that has been taken away from you in modern life. When access to food, shelter, water are all easily provided to you, the human brain just thinks, okay, what problems am I supposed to solve now? I am designed to come up with creative solutions to adapt and survive in a hostile environment. Without such problems, I guess I need to invent new ones to keep myself occupied. And that's at least partially why so many young people are anxious and depressed hypochondriacs that think everything is going to kill them. Motorcycles are not the problem. Motorcycles can be a solution. Don't be afraid of motorcycles. Another problem is the way motorcycle culture in America still has the stigma that it earned in the early days. Non-riders think of motorcyclists as the big bearded leather pirates that catcalled their girlfriend when they walked past the bar on bike night. Or they think of the pejorative crotch rocket street squids that lane split past them on the highway doing triple digits. But motorcycling is super diverse and varied, with so many types of bikes, riding styles, and people who ride them. I was actually having a conversation with my wife the other day, and she was surprised to learn that on my Discord server, there's a lot of anime-loving dorks who love riding like touring and adventure bikes. She thought there was a bunch of like, degen street squid guys, but Yeah, maybe that's just the type of audience that's attracted to the AmiNoob Discord server, or Discord people in general, but there's a lot of you furries out there who like to ride Versus 300s. I don't know. But these intricacies are not commonly depicted in popular culture, and being so absent from the zeitgeist, it's hard to think of any way in which new people can be introduced to motorcycling outside of stumbling across a video on YouTube or having a friend or family convince them to ride firsthand. Which, again, I take a lot of responsibility in the fact that a lot of people first get exposed to motorcycling culture through this channel. It's kind of crazy. I have a big responsibility to show you guys the right way and the fun way. I try to do my best here. A perfect example of this is the way in which the long way round resulted in a huge increase in interest in adventure bikes and adventure-style riding. I'm sure many existing riders saw that series and switched teams, but I bet there were countless non-riders who watched it solely based on Ewan McGregor's involvement and were like, wow, that actually looks really cool. I've never heard of that style of riding before, but now I'm gonna head out to my local BMW dealership and check out a GS. Think about the popularity of the van life trend. Basically a romanticization of homelessness by middle-class 20-somethings who get their parents to bankroll a Sprinter van build so they can drive around the country and take selfies for 6 months. Nice sabbatical, bro. People have been road tripping for as long as the car has existed, and people have been camping for even longer. I mean, you could maybe classify the original Wagoneers who went across the West as van life people, but a lot of them just died. But van life has been packaged in a way that suggests it is a solution to late-stage capitalism, posing the idea that spending tens of thousands of dollars on a van in which you will live your entire life is a valid long-term solution to the economic issues younger generations are faced with. So now, all these people are living in vans and clogging up state parks and anytime fitness bathrooms because social media has branded van life as the answer to widespread generational problems, when in reality, it's just camping. It's expensive camping. They've gentrified homelessness, my guy. You have to be mentally ill to pay tens of thousands of dollars to build a van in which you live in full time with another fully grown adult and multiple animals. That just ain't right. But my point is, its popularity is a result of our cultural landscape the way motorcycling had been for generations prior. Our collective values as a society has just shifted in a direction away from motorcycling. And even though a lot of brands have put an emphasis into attracting new motorcyclists with affordable, value-driven bikes, it doesn't seem to be catching on. There is literally no better time to be a new motorcycle rider. I did a whole video about this. Bikes are as well built as they've ever been, they're as safe as they've ever been, they are super reliable, and the offerings are as diverse as they've ever been. In the 80s and 90s, if you were a beginner, you could get a Ninja 250 or a Rebel 250. Yet there were still more people riding. If new people are brought into the sport, that doesn't negate the fact that all of our favorite bikes may very well sooner or later be discontinued. We're seeing it happen in real time as emissions regulations continue to tighten. A lot of our beloved motorcycle models are no longer staying in production as manufacturers negate evolving 4-cylinder older bikes to meet newer standards. Instead, they invest in building out new engines that are cheaper to produce and more versatile and can be dropped into everything from roadsters to adventure bikes. Plus, there is the omnipresent threat of electric vehicles that seems to constantly be looming overhead. I've ranted about EVs in plenty of videos recently, so go check those out if you want to hear it. I'll spare you the details today and summarize it with the sentiment that EVs are not really doing much of good in the motorcycling world as a whole. The declining rate of riders isn't just limited to motorcycles. Younger generations are even just driving cars less. The amount of people with driver's licenses is going down as an increase in urbanization and other transportation options leaves some people feeling like it isn't even worth driving or owning a car, let alone a motorcycle. Whether it be rideshare options like Uber or Lyft or rentable bikes and scooters, people are able to get around without personal transportation. Now, personally, I think that's a net benefit for society. I would love to see more public transportation and people getting into motorcycling because they actually really love it. I think more trains, more options, and more walkability is generally a good thing for society as a whole. But the use of scooters and mopeds is even declining, which previously served as a gateway to get into riders on larger bikes. With the popularity of electric bikes that don't need to be registered, insured, or require any special licensing, the need for small displacement scooters is becoming non-existent. And lastly, motorcycling has always been very community focused. There are bike nights, motorcycle groups, racing events that all serve in bringing people together. I hear people say that they gave up riding because they no longer had anyone to ride with way more often than I hear people say they gave it up because they crashed or got hurt or could no longer afford it. Modern society has become increasingly solitary. People go to school online, they do their jobs online, they make friends online in community forums or through gaming platforms. They maintain friendships with people who live in all sorts of different places of the country or around the world, so it's very difficult to build that in-person motorcycle community which can incentivize you to ride or help maintain your interest in it. I'd like to think what we do here at Yami Noob gets people excited about motorcycling and engages in the online community, whether it be our content or on our Discord server, and it seems to feel more and more important as time goes on. But the thing I love seeing most is on Discord is when people get together in real life because they live near each other and we connected them and then they're buddies and they go riding. That's the best thing that I see on there. But there are so many tangible moments and experiences that someone has out in the real world that can flip the switch and gets you hooked on riding. So what do you think? Are we actually witnessing the end of motorcycling, or am I being too pessimistic? Do you think this is just going to become like a weird niche hobby like equestrianism or something like that? I bet you there's more horse riders than motorcycle riders. There's more bird watchers than motorcycle riders. I know that for a fact. So you might be thinking, what can I do to help? If you know someone that you think could benefit from having more motorcycles in their lives, beg with them, plead with them, inundate them with motorcycle memes and videos relentlessly until they take the leap and sign up for an MSF class. That is really your duty as a rider, to get at least one other person hooked on it so we can keep this industry alive. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you later. Fact: the Earth's gravitational pull is not uniform because of the distribution of mass across the planet not being uniform. Regions with denser material like mountains or large underground deposits exert slightly stronger gravitational forces than areas with less dense material, creating variations in gravity across Earth's surface. Goodbye.
Keep watching Yami Noob!